30th of July. Welcome in particular to members of the public in the gallery and online, and also to members of the press. I'll introduce our officers. So we have on my right Ms. Sarah Wilkinson, who is the Planning Development Manager. Also on my right, Mr. Russell Chick, also the Planning Development Manager. We have Mr. Neil Troughton, who is our Highways representative. On my left, Mr. Ben Guard, our Legal Advisor, and Ms. Jodie Gibson, also from the Legal Department. And we have Mr. Paul Fuller, our Cabinet Member for Planning, Coastal Protection and Flooding. A few housekeeping notices before we begin. There are no planned fire drills during this meeting. If you hear the fire alarm, please treat it as a real emergency and evacuate the building via the nearest safe escape route. The nearest escape route is via the signposted set of stairs to your left as you leave the council chamber or the public gallery. Exit via the door at the back of the building, walk across the inner car park around the building to the evacuation point, which is the pavement opposite the police station. This can't be used in the event of an emergency. Please don't re-enter the building until you're advised it's safe to do so by a council member of staff. If everybody could check that you have your mobile phones switched off or to mute. And for all speakers, if I could just remind you to use the microphones when you're speaking, it's the button on the right, and it should illuminate red when it is on. And if you could make sure you turn it off once you've finished speaking, thank you. If I can ask that no food is consumed during the meeting unless it's for medical needs. Obviously, it's very warm today, so I would certainly encourage anyone who needs to get water or such, remove their jackets to make sure that you are comfortable. Colleagues will be aware that you cannot leave the council chamber during the presentation or debate, and if you do so, you'll be unable to vote on that application. And for members of the public, both upstairs and watching virtually, you're here just to observe the process and won't be permitted to speak unless you've registered to do so. So I'll just run through the lighting system. When you're asked to speak, the green light will display. The amber light will flash for a few seconds when coming to close your speech, and then when the red light displays, I will stop you talking. And that's to ensure that all parties receive the same amount of time. Right, so we move then to the agenda. We have apologies from Councillor Claire Critchison. We have, as it were, a half apology from Martin Oliver, who hopes to be with us for the second agenda item. Any other changes? I don't think so. We then move to the minutes from our last meeting. Are there any addendums, changes, errata? In which case I'll be looking for a proposer and seconder. Proposer, thank you. Thank you. That's carried. All those in favour? Thank you. Sign those. Declarations of interest. Any declarations? No. Excellent. We have had no public questions received for the public question time, so we move on then swiftly. If there are no questions, we will move on to agenda item 5, the planning report. This is item number, and I will come to it. Item number 19/01205/OUT, and I will hand over to Ms. Wilkinson for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully you can all hear me. The application site is identified as outlined in red on the slide in front of you. It's an area of 6.2 hectares on the northern side of Newport Road and to the west of Scotchwellsbrook Lane. It's part of the Sandown Airport wider site, which is in blue, the runway running in this approximate location. And then a slightly closer up zoomed in image that shows those roads in a bit more detail, and the red line being the application boundary. Scotchwellsbrook Lane at the point of the cursor and Newport Road to the south there. I would highlight there is one error in the report in the details of the location and site characteristics section. It refers to it as Scotchwellsbrook Road. Throughout the report, it does correct that to Scotchwellsbrook Lane. So apologies, it is Scotchwellsbrook Lane. I've included just a Google Earth image to help that. We were there on Friday, councillors, so you will be aware of the nature of the site as shown there. It's in this approximate location. I've included some photographs. Again, we were there on Friday, but just showing effectively each photograph as you go around is just moved around the field. So it's a kind of panorama, a split panorama, should we say, as you move around that field, with then the temporary hangars on the opposite side of Scotchwellsbrook Lane that we saw on Friday. I've also included two images of the list, or an image of the two listed buildings at the top of the slide, and then their relationship to the boundary of the site at the bottom. We did point those out on the site, so councillors, you would have seen those in relation to the proposed development. Moving to the application, it seeks outline consent with access and scale to be considered at this time for 7,245 square metres, of commercial floor space. That would be separated into 6,505 of light industrial, which is shown in the blue of the blue blocks in this area of the site. And then 740 square metres of D2, which has been set aside as a parcel of land for the relocation of the Aviation Museum, which is currently operating out of a temporary consent near the airport buildings down here, in essence, near where we've parked. So you have to travel down there. The application also includes this area, which is deemed to be a wildflower meadow, with an access road coming into the site off the proposed access onto Newport Road, which would be located at the point of the cursor. This seeks to use the approved access point with Newport Road that was granted consent as part of improvements and alterations to Cheverton Park Holiday Camp, which is accessed as you travel up this road just outside of the plan. So the proposal would use the same junction point with an access coming in and then an offshoot to move across the site and the wildflower meadow to then enter this kind of commercial area. A slightly closer up image that shows that layout as proposed, the proximity of those buildings to Newport Road, the buffer that's referred to within the report, and then the positioning of the proposed Aviation Museum at the top of the image, or the proposed land for the Aviation Museum. As I said, the proposal incorporates access and scale. Looking at the scale of the proposal, some cross sections have been provided to show that these would be 2-storey scale buildings. And then the indicative design shows the Aviation Museum being more of a curved feature, but obviously that is just for indicative. That's not what's being proposed in terms of the design of the buildings. However, a few visuals have been provided to show the details of the scale and the potential nature of the development in terms of the design concept that could be followed. So I've incorporated those for information. These are quite useful in order to gain a better understanding of the scale of the proposed development in terms of the buildings themselves and the level of development within that site area. And again, those buildings in visual images. Moving on to the proposed access, we did all have this plan on site. In essence, the application access would be at the point of the cursor here. It is like almost opposite the entrance into the garden centre, which is here. During the site visit, we drove into the garden centre and turned around and then came out again. So you will understand the relationship between that access point, or that entrance point, and the proposed access point. On this plan, the black writing and works to the highway were approved as part of the Cheverton COPS application. The pink on the plan is what was originally proposed as part of this development. However, those works have changed through the determination process, as when questioned by Ireland Roads in terms of the delivery of the proposed bus stop enhancement works at this point of the site. So there was proposed to be a relocated bus stop here at the point of the cursor, and allowing for a pedestrian crossing across the road with a drop curb, a tactile crossing point, I should say, and then a footpath running the site side of the road to access down to the site entranceway. It is no longer possible to provide those works, or it is not possible to provide those footpath works and bus stop on the opposite side of the road because the land is not within the applicant's control, and therefore that has been removed from the scheme. The current proposal therefore seeks to utilise the existing bus stops at the site entrance, with the existing site entrance with Scotchwells Brook Lane. I will show you some photographs shortly. And the westbound bus stop would be where the concerns are in terms of pedestrian safety, would be enhanced with a concrete area to be off, a small concrete area, so anyone waiting could be off the carriageway at the very least. But the improvements in this part of the site are no longer proposed. Moving to some photographs of the road itself, travelling down Newport Road towards the site from Apps Heath. Just thought a few of these would be useful. Looking slightly further down with the open aspect across the site, the current entrance into the site. That is not the proposed entrance, which is further down. You can see just in that image the right-hand turn lane into the garden centre, so you can get a perception of where that proposed access is as you travel down Newport Road. And obviously the buildings would be in this area of the site. And then moving through that image, again, you have the entrance into the garden centre, and so the site entrance will be slightly further down Newport Road. And then the current, looking the opposite direction as you're coming from the Morrison's roundabout, looking up. The report refers to a vista from this location travelling up the road, and this image is simply just to identify that vista referred to. You can also see in this image, but I have provided a slightly closer one, the bus stop on the opposite side of the road. This is the bus stop of significant concern to Island Roads and officers in relation to pedestrian safety, not solely in relation to the fact that there is currently no refuge off the carriageway, so you have to stand in the road. In essence, there's a small area, but it's not hard surfaced. The application would propose a small standing concrete area there, but given the nature and scale of the development, officers do not consider those enhancements are sufficient for the scale of the development. Just to give that in some context, the application indicates a range of different employment numbers, and that's covered in the report, but you would have those number of employees coming to the site, and we would wish to seek some of those to actually come to work by bus or other sustainable transport modes. The application also indicates that the Aviation Museum, which is proposed as part of the D2 use of the yellow building under the site plan, could generate up to 45,000 visitors a year. Of those, it's indicated that half would come by air, but you still have a significant number of remaining visitors would come to the site. Officers are significantly concerned about the principle of visitors coming to the site and not being able to safely visit that site by public transport. Hence the reason for refusal in relation to the lack of bus stop enhancements to make the site sustainable in those terms. Secondary concern to that relates to the ability of pedestrians to cross the road in relation to that bus stop. As councillors, you will see the footpath on the opposite side of the road is elevated, and therefore you cannot immediately cross from that footpath into onto the pedestrian route. Therefore, if we go back one, you'd have to come out of that footpath onto Scotchwells Brook Lane itself, which has no pavements, and then cross the road and walk up the active carriageway to that bus stop. Moving to the bus stop on the other side of the road, that is off the carriageway and actually is served by a lay-by and has a pavement in association with it. There are some additional enhancements that could be made to that bus stop also, which are all covered in the report. The application is, as indicated, recommended for refusal. Those reasons relate to the lack of bus stop enhancements and safe sustainable transport routes to the site, the detrimental impact on the rural character as a result of the scale of those proposed buildings and the density of the development, together with insufficient information with regard to the potential loss of hedgerow to facilitate pedestrian linked accesses to the site. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. We move now then to the public speaking element of this agenda item. If I could ask Ms Penelope Baker, you have 6 minutes to speak. Thank you, Ms Baker.
Yeah.
If I could ask you to use your microphone, thank you.
The application is right. The land is finite. Both energy and food security are essential to a growing population. This application is for a commercial and leisure purpose, not an essential or needed or wanted purpose. The application site is potential farmland and/or a solar farm. The new government, with new priorities, places generation of local renewable energy, including solar power, as a priority, and Great British Energy is set to invest in solar. Solar farms are essential in the race to provide local renewable energy and national energy security. The challenge for areas like the Isle of Wight is that solar farms be of a sustainable size and that they work with nature, not against it, which is a task for island planners to provide appropriate mitigation and to ensure a balanced distribution for the whole island. This island has an important role to play as a renewable energy hub. There are major employment benefits that flow from a commitment to the development of wind and solar power on this island. The new government is to financially reward local communities where new solar farms and wind turbines are located. Such government financial support could provide much needed community bus services. As was apparent at the Bus and Rail Users Group Forum recently, new smaller shuttle community bus services are needed, not only in land sensitive areas such as Ventnor, but also for isolated communities such as Perone Way, Sandown, and some rural areas. The answer from the Southern Vectis Bus Company representative at that meeting is that new funding is needed. In addition to the importance of energy and food production, this island is a UNESCO biosphere. The application undermines this status as this rural landscape is part of the jigsaw creating the UNESCO Biosphere Reserve status, referred to in subsection 3.8 of the island plan. Key to protecting the Biosphere Reserve status and the island's special environments is the local nature recovery plan. The development presents an unacceptable loss of biodiversity and is therefore against Environment Section 4, subsection 4.30 of the Island Planning Strategy. If successful, this application will obliterate a historic rural landscape of importance to the valuable tourist economy. Instead of the historic rural outlook, a tourist may wonder why they chose to visit an urban landscape for a holiday break. In addition, there is a cumulative effect of developments such as much needed housing at Berry Hill in South Lake, together with this application. Section EV6 of the Island Planning Strategy refers to protecting and providing open spaces. This application will remove the important settlement gap between Lake and Newchurch, contrary to section EV10 of the Island Planning Strategy. Subsection 4.5 refers to settlement identity. Subsection 4.15 refers to the importance of the gap between settlements. Finally, regarding traffic generated in the proposed development, the stretch of road accessing the site under consideration is potentially dangerous as it is narrow and unsuitable for the high volume of traffic this application would produce. The high volume of traffic generated by this application will create a hazard as it accesses or leaves the site. Traffic from the development will also undermine the number 8 bus route, which will be delayed by traffic congestion on this stretch of Newport Road.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. I'd like then to invite Mr. Tony Fowler, who is the applicant, to speak. Sorry, what was that? You're happy to yes, yeah. So Mr. Phil Salmon, then the agent. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Salmon.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a revised outline planning application submitted as far back as 2019. We've reduced significantly the scale from a previous submission. This is to be an allocated site for employment in the new island planning strategy. Yet, disappointingly, we have a recommendation for refusal. It's important to highlight the critical context. Firstly, the proposals represent a major inward investment from off-island onto the island to deliver a much-needed employment site, creating up to 500 jobs. The 2012 core strategy promoted the creation of over 7,000 sustainable jobs, yet this target has not been met. Secondly, other allocated sites and permissions championed by the Council have not come forward, including Nicholson Road in Ryde, for which the permission has now lapsed, and Kingston and East Cowes. Thirdly, there is a demand for employment units. The Bay Area is already constrained in terms of a lack of brownfield sites and the prevalence of flood risk areas such as College Close. The new government's drive for supporting growth will lead to a new NPPF, and local planning authorities need to demonstrate support for new jobs and not just houses. Regarding the officer's report, we respond as follows. As an outline application, details of design will be dealt with at reserve matter stages. Incidentally, the scale we've illustrated is no higher than the buildings permitted and constructed at Branston Farm, a far more remote site. The access proposed is already permitted as part of the Cheverton Copse Planning Permission. It is fully compliant with highway standards. Pedestrian links are good. We have addressed the issue of the need to improve bus facilities. The current arrangement is dangerous. We propose to improve bus positions, usability and accessibility, serving existing airport facilities. Only 3 minutes to the bus stop from the site, whilst at Branston Farm a minimum of 9 minutes walk is required, yet the LPA approved it. The scheme includes provision of a fully serviced site for a new aviation museum, something which has been supported for a long time. The site provides for an opportunity of genuine biodiversity net gain. Hedgerows proposed to be removed are already partly consented by the Cheverton Copse Permission. There is sufficient land to enhance habitat significantly. Finally, I want to stress the importance of granting planning permission in light of the draft island planning strategy. This scheme is viable, deliverable and sustainable. If refused, what message does this give to prospective investors on the island when the LPA refuses schemes on sites, which is at the same time, on the other hand, championing it as an allocation? There is a mismatch between planning allocations and development management. In this case, the authority can actually back up its strategic policy aims with support from outside investors by granting planning permission this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Salmon. We then turn to Mr. Tony Fowler. Mr. Fowler, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and councillors. My name is Tony Fowler, and I am one of the freeholders of the Isle of Wight Airfield Sandown and the adjoining application land. My business partner and I purchased a semi-derelict airfield from the receivers 12 years ago. The airfield had lacked investment and was hobbled by third-party speculative developers ransoming the main access and other areas. With our investment and input, the airfield, whilst retaining its unique character, is now ranked #1 general aviation destination airfield in the country and brings much needed business and tourism to the island. We have also been instrumental in providing accommodation for WAM, the Wight Aviation Museum charity, which is now expanding and forms part of this outline application. The Black Arrow rocket replica was also partly facilitated at our premises, a unique monument to island history, and is currently displayed at the airfield. A further building, which has been dramatically improved, accommodates the award-winning charity Ability Dogs for Young People. Our part is one of enablement, and our current outline application is based on managing and developing an area of land adjoining which has already been identified as suitable under the proposed island planning strategy. Investment for the proposed employment park will come from the mainland, and so it must be of a scale that is economically viable to cover the huge infrastructure costs associated with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler. We turn now then to Councillor Claire Mosdell, who is the local councillor. Councillor Mosdell, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Councillor Mosdell. That concludes the public speaking elements of this agenda item. Ms Wilkinson is going to address a couple of points of information in relation to some of the issues were raised during public speaking. Ms Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to provide some responses on accuracy, nothing more. Just that a comment from a public speaker was that the Nicholson Road application has lapsed. That is incorrect. It has not lapsed. In terms of the comments in relation to it being an allocated site, that is covered in the report in quite a lot of detail from paragraph 7.5 onwards. And in terms of the differing numbers of job creation indicated in the submission documents, that is also covered from paragraph 7.10 of the report in relation to the officers' assessments based on the employment needs study commissioned as part of the Island Planning Strategy. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So we move then to the question elements of this item. If I could, as I often do, belabor the point, to try to keep the questions and the debates separate, just so that people watching at home can have a clear understanding of where things are progressing. So I would look to colleagues for starting the questions. Councillor Churchman.
Yes, the airfield, the airstrip, according to that, aircraft will be taking off and actually going over part of the development. Do we know at what height the aircraft are by the time they get to the end of the current runway? Because if a disaster should occur for any reason, I always think of that extra field as being a bit of a safety area. But as I said, have we an idea of the height of the aircraft by the end of the runway? Or am I asking, sorry, the impossible?
Good.
Thank you, Chairman. I will be honest, I do not know the height of the aircraft at that point. However, I will show you a couple of slides that can hopefully help the assessment of that. One is this layout plan, which shows at the point of the cursor, and this red line, it's like orangey line that runs through, that is the takeoff funnel. This darker green area being the runway itself. So there isn't any buildings actually like within the takeoff funnel, as it were. There is access works, but part of those have been consented. But there's no actual buildings within the takeoff funnel or kind of in very close proximity to the runway. The other plan I will show you, if members will just bear with me one moment, is an extract from the Civil Aviation Authority guidelines. Obviously, this isn't a licensed site, registered site, so it doesn't actually at this point have to comply with these. But this shows the assessment in terms of the nature of development in relation to that takeoff funnel, which is then in pink, and how large buildings can be in proximity to that area. So the scale of the development would have to carefully consider, and has done so, that there wouldn't be buildings which would hit that outer horizontal surface zone in terms of the height of buildings. That would mean that the airfield couldn't at a later date be licensed in conjunction with this guidance. I hope that answers the question in a roundabout way.
Thank you. Supplementary.
May I just ask a second question? Have the museum at the airport been consulted at all about any movement of them actually moving to a different site? Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. The Aviation Museum have supported the application.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. My question relates to the proposed entrance to the site, which I was contacted a long time ago about the application that delivered that entrance into Cheverton Copse caravan park. Now, my understanding is that entrance has been pretty much constructed. It's not ready to go onto the road yet, but the rest of the route is constructed already, I believe, isn't it? And I could see it from where I went and did my own site visit. I could see part of it, but I didn't wander right up to it. But I'm fully conversant with it. But my question is, that was obviously delivered to provide access to the caravan park and the extension of that caravan park. But how would we know whether it's adequate to provide the correct entrance into what could become a really, really busy site? And do we have any data on that? And also, I suppose the entrance into that road that's already been constructed, which hasn't opened up onto the road yet, someone's got to pay for that at some point. Is that to be funded by this application in part or not?
Thank you.
Otherwise, what I was getting at really is if the previous applicant that's constructed the road doesn't go forward with opening it onto the highway, then surely this isn't deliverable anyway. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. I will try and answer all of the kind of questions set out there. I may have to turn to Island Roads if my answers aren't adequate for you, Councillor Price. In essence, Island Road have considered the application and following the submission of additional information, haven't raised objections over the additional traffic generation onto that new proposed access. There is some, I suppose, officer concern in regards to when that was approved as part of Cheverton COPS. It was done so where you couldn't, there's a barrier. So if you drive up to Cheverton COPS, you can't then drive down to then Scotchwellsbrook Lane, because we don't want that link through the site. So that's because then you are still potentially putting additional traffic onto Scotchwellsbrook Lane. But Island Roads is satisfied that the junction would adequately be able to accommodate the additional traffic generation from the site. In terms of who would deliver it, in essence, if the application were to be approved, a condition would have to be put on the consent that no works could be undertaken until that access was put in, because at no point would we authorise the construction work or any additional traffic onto Scotchwellsbrook Lane in association with this development, because it simply isn't safe. For context, and it was mentioned in public speaking, the comment about Island Roads not allowing one additional vehicle, if I put that in some context for councillors, we had an application that was refused for works inside the airport grounds. They were proposing a certain number of traffic movements. Island Roads at that point said that actually a few may be acceptable, but the number of generation was unacceptable. At that point, the planning inspectorate dismissed the appeal, saying that no additional movements are acceptable onto that access, which officers have used in subsequent refusals in relation to any traffic generation onto Scotchwellsbrook Lane. But so ultimately, as to who would pay for it, it's not relevant necessarily to the planning considerations. It would simply be that it would have to be put in place prior to any work commencing on the development itself, on the buildings, for safety reasons.
Thank you. Supplementary, Councillor Price.
No, I need to comment that, you know, the biggest concern would always be how dangerous that road is and the entrance into Scotchwellsbrook Lane, which is absolutely horrific. There was only that fatal accident with a scooter a couple of years ago. Right at that point, it's a really dangerous carbuncle of entrances in and out of properties there.
Thank you. Councillor Jones-Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've just got another question following from Councillor Price's theme, really, about traffic and the horror story I heard from Councillor Mosdell as well about waiting at that bus stop. And so to sort of go back in time for the Cheverton permission, presumably that is the same bus stop on that side of the road that was for the people using the farm, the new tourism place, yes? So in my head, I'm thinking, if you've got a really dangerous bus stop, it's been dangerous for years, why aren't we addressing that as actually working with highways and the bus company if it's so dangerous? Because otherwise it's going to be dangerous for everybody who uses it. So if this piece of land, you know, say it doesn't go through tonight and that you've got employment land there, that you have a company decides to build, they have 10 employees, half of them are at the bus stop. You see what I mean? It's like, if it's dangerous, no matter how many people are using it. So surely we should be addressing that if we're going to be able to bring a piece of employment land forward. And perhaps I'm being really thick here. And also for the sustainable tourism element of Cheverton Farm, the COPS farm as well. So I'm just trying to get that straight in my head, because I can't move forward actually in determining this without really getting underneath this issue, which seems to be a very big issue, reading the report and from what we heard.
Thank you. Ms Wilkinson, are you able to shed any context? I know it may not strictly be a planning matter per se in this application, but I think it's absolutely useful to hear what the roadblocks might be to making that a safer bus stop and access.
it's not really a question I can answer in other than to say, yes, I would agree that something needs to be done at that bus stop. It did significantly delay the original permission for the temporary consent for the Aviation Museum in its current location. That is one of the reasons it is only a temporary consent, because of the concerns over the location in relation to the access and the bus stop. That did include requirements to improve that bus stop as well. Those are the improvements that this current scheme proposes to facilitate. In terms of the concrete surface, which was considered suitable in relation to the scale of the Aviation Museum in its current temporary location. Yes, there is. The allocation site requires the enhancements to sustainable transport links, the enhancements to pedestrians. So it is a challenge. At the moment, it's linked to land ownership in terms of the facilitation of those improvements. But there's no denying that it is the access into Scottrells Brook Lane and the associated highway infrastructure is a limiter on development within this vicinity.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Okay. So I'm just thinking forward. So if we want to really make use of this site as it's been allocated in the island plan, or the island plan that's out, draft island plan at the moment, can we not look at doing improvements as local authority through compulsory purchase? I just kind of really concerned that we've got employment land which we're never going to be able to release, it seems, because of a bus stop. I just don't get it. It's just like we're desperate for employment land, so we need to be able to, bring these sites forward, bring them forward safely. I'm just sort of thinking further up the road at Brantleston. I mean, that the bus stop situation there isn't ideal either. I mean, I don't know if we've got a little pull in, is there, past the Chili Farm, I think. But anyway, I know, but again, you've got a similar situation, haven't you? So, we need to really think about our sustainable transport system alongside when we've got the plan as allocations, or work with our colleagues at Island Roads and Southern Vectors to make these sites safer. Otherwise, how are we going to move forward?
Thank you, Councillor Jones-Evans. I think that was sort of, I guess, more of a comment. Was there a specific? I mean, I certainly take your point, and I think it's a very valid one. I'm keen to explore any additional questions first, but I think, yeah, certainly something I was worrying about. Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. As we heard, the application was received and validated in October 2019. Is there a time constraint on this as to when the decision needs to be determined?
Thank you. Ms. Wilkinson.
I suppose yes and no would be the answer to that. That it has been with us some time. We have been in that time, we've been working with the applicants and they've been working separately to try and resolve the issue of the bus stop improvements and the highway improvement works. But it's got to the point where, in essence, the application just needed to be determined because those discussions had come to an end. So it is very, it's been with us a very long time, and therefore we do wish to determine it. The only timescale now is the point in which the applicants could choose to appeal non-determination, rather than actually anything else dictating that, because it is the time it's been with us. The applicants have asked us to determine it, which is why we are at committee this evening. So we've kind of, in essence, moved this application to determination at their request, because the discussions have come to a point where they can go no further.
Supplementary.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Additional questions, Councillor Quirk.
The Newport Road is one of the 4 roads that come in and out of the bay. The other is the 3055, which for substantial parts of this year has been closed between Shanklin and Ventnor, and for substantial parts of this year has been closed through Brazing Marshes because of the flooding. That leaves 2 roads. The other road is the 3022, Victoria Avenue, which has frequently flooded at Blackwater. So for much of the year, the only route in and out of the bay is the Newport Road. And we're looking at something that can put additional pressure on that one route. Now, unless we're doing something about the other routes, this is going to be unsustainable. It takes 20 minutes, half an hour to get through the lake at times, even now. And this is become an additional pressure point if you're going to have 500 people there who can't go because the buses are unsafe and who are going to want to go by car. And I think it's going to put an undue pressure. And I think that needs to be resolved before this site becomes a viable site.
Thank you, Councillor.
One other question, a supplementary question
Certainly.
maybe as well. Some of the best arable land on the island is actually in the Allerton Valley. This seems to me to be a continuation of the Allerton Valley. It might be hidden somewhere in the report, and I apologise if I've missed it because I do have some problems with my eyes at present. But is this high quality agricultural land? Because that's what it's defined as at present. It's not used as at present, but that's what it's defined as at present. And should we be taking good arable land out of potential productive use for uses that could be put on less productive land?
Thank you. Ms Wilkinson.
Thanks, Chairman. I think the only question that there's a chance there is the arable land one. If I've missed one, apologies, and you may have to re-ask me, Councillor Quirk, but we were checking the that detail for you. It is grade 3, which is kind of moderate to good. There's no distinction as to whether it's A or B. Obviously, the site is indicated as potential allocation. Obviously, that allocation is only 2.99 hectares rather than the proposed 6.2, because the allocation doesn't include what is shown to be the wildflower meadow as part of the submission. But obviously the allocation didn't consider the loss of that area of relatively small area of agricultural land to be unacceptable, and officers would take that same position in regards to the application.
Thank you. Supplementary, Councillor Quirk? No. I feel that organically we're moving towards a debate. So, Councillor Jones-Evans.
I just have one more technical question, please, Chair. Are we able, if someone was minded to put forward a proposal where we put conditional approval for the outline, could a condition be that no development takes place until the situation with a safe bus stop on that side of the road? You call it the western side, or not sure, or northern side. Is that possible? That is conditioned.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson.
In simple terms, no. In order to put a condition on, there has to be a prospect of it being done, of it being achieved. Based on the information we have in front of us, there is no prospect of the applicant achieving those bus stop enhancements that would be necessary. So we couldn't condition them, because you'd in essence be granted consent that could never be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Is there evidence to show that? Because again, I'm brings me back to my earlier question about how we're ever going to release this parcel of land for employment use if we can't get over this bus stop issue. I'm just finding that really strange situation that we're in. Otherwise, it undermines the allocation and the island plan, surely, if a bus stop is going to stop development of this parcel of land for employment.
I don't know whether colleagues wish to discuss further. I mean, it's a valid point. Ms Wilkinson, do you feel able to address that issue?
Thanks, Chairman. I can't comment in terms of the proposed allocation. It is an allocation in a draft island planning strategy out for Reg 19 consultation. So if there is a fundamental issue with the potential deliverability of that site because of the bus stop, then that is in essence a comment against the a comment that would need to be made in terms of the Reg 19 process and the potential deliverability of that as an allocated site. In terms of the application in front of us, the options to provide an adequate bus stop have been explored by the applicant since 2019 when the application was originally submitted, and a solution could not be found that was agreeable to Island Roads, and therefore that is why officers have moved to recommend refusal of the application.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. I feel maybe that's an issue that we can ventilate further in the debate. I know that Councillor Churchman has a question. Councillor Churchman.
Yes, I go into the site fairly often. Is there not already existing land within Sandown Airport that could be developed. I know at the end of the runway, there are buildings there now. Are they occupied? Where the hangars are at the moment, where the museum is, there's quite a large area of land there. Why do we need to go outside the airport onto a greenfield site, outside the settlement area, to build industrial land? And I do find the 500 jobs, if only, I think would be my next question, and where are the people going to put into them? Anyway, I think my question is there not enough land already not in use on the airport to facilitate more industrial sites? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Churchman. Ms Wilkinson, you able to give an indicative, perhaps just in relation to the size of the land that is there and what could be accommodated within it?
To be honest, I think it's probably more a rhetorical question for members to ponder, in terms of there is other land around the site. We saw it, we attended a site visit, we looked at the airport. So it's not necessarily something I can speculate an answer to in terms of other land available. There are other consents in and around the airport site for various tourism developments that have not completed, that are in the area of land to the effectively right as you're stood on Scotchwell Brook Lane. So we saw the derelict building in and around that area. There is consent for various tourism units. Whether a landowner wished to accommodate something different on that parcel of land, I couldn't comment. It's effectively available to them as an option potentially, but I believe it's more of a rhetorical question for members to ask themselves.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. On that note, yes, please.
Sorry, I meant to say one more thing and I didn't. Ultimately, we are here to determine the application in front of us and not to look at potential alternatives that could come forward on other land in and around this area. Sorry, Chairman.
Well, at all, no, thank you. And on that note, I suggest perhaps we start to move towards the debate part of this agenda item. Is there anyone who wishes to kick things off? Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few things. First of all, the lady that spoke said about the need for solar farms and wind farms. And, you know, sadly, I've been on this committee long enough to see us turn down those very things because people often don't want them. So I don't see that as a reason for not building on this site. Business and leisure facilities that you said aren't required. Well, they are. They are required, and they're required by young people. They're not required maybe by some of our age groups, but they are required by young people. People want leisure facilities, they want things to do, they want things to visit, and so do tourists. So I can't agree with that. And this site is connected to other facilities that would make it, while a real shame to build on a greenfield site, it's unfortunately going to be necessary. We know that going forward. There's going to be no other options often. And I'm always minded to support things much more when it involves business, leisure and employment. I think the White Aviation Museum, you know, who clearly support this application. Now, whether this funds it or not is totally irrelevant, because what it would do is unlock a situation where they could obtain funding through heritage grants and things to probably have a purpose-built facility built on that site. If they have a long enough leasehold or a long enough lease on that land, or even a freehold on it, that would unlock things for them. So again, I think there's good reasons to support it in that respect. But I guess it all comes back again to the access and the safety of the site. Not improving the bus stops and the bus links and public transport links would be an utter failure. So I agree that the planning officers are right to say that this application should be refused partly on that basis. To not be able to improve those with this application would be an absolute travesty, to not be able to provide that improvement. I've got my reservations about whether the entrance in could be delivered opposite the Honor and Jeffrey site. Anything that's going to put more traffic into Scotchwell Brook Lane is a massive problem to safety. So again, I agree with that. But overall, I feel quite supportive of the principle of business and leisure use at that site. It does make sense. The bit that holds me back, of course, is that at the moment it's just a greenfield that could be used for something farm related, perhaps. But with those other complications, I think I, at this stage, would be minded to support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Any additional comments from colleagues? Yes, Councillor Stewart.
Very briefly, there is some suggestion that the traffic safety issue might be addressed by reducing the speed limits from 40 to 30. Obviously, that's something which might be part of a speed review, and given the number of accidents and things, that's certainly something to be taken into account. I tend to agree with Councillor Price that we should certainly be looking to support industry and leisure facilities, but I think fundamentally we do come up against the complete block that it is at the moment not safe, partly because of the bus stops and partly because of the level of traffic on those routes.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Any additional comments from colleagues? I think I would just reiterate those issues. It does seem like a prime site in many respects, but safety is fundamentally the basis upon, or a large part of this recommendation for refusal. And it is one thing to speculate about what could be, but we do have to determine on the application as it is, notwithstanding the NPPF, which provides a proactive work on the part of the planning department to try to overcome those obstacles. But I think certainly us as a committee don't wish to extend perhaps too far into the future about what might be. Any additional points, or we would need to look for Councillor Price?
I think, you know, at the end of the day, we're here to determine this application today. That's why it's in front of us. We understand it's been a long journey to this point, so we must determine it. I think this would be a completely different discussion today if those tangible improvements to the bus stops were likely to happen and would be part of this application. The fact that the one up by Honour and Jeffrey being removed is the bit that really kills it for me. But the other one down at Scotchwellsbrook Lane is equally just as bad. I think with those improvements actually deliverable in this application, and some more meat on the bone in regards to the employment and the figures, a bit more detail on the traffic movements, I think we would have a completely different discussion. So I think in that respect, I find it quite hard to go against something that is potentially going to deliver a good leisure and employment facility, but I would propose that we refuse this application in line with officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Seconded by Councillor Quirk. Unless there are any further comments, then I would suggest we perhaps proceed to the vote in terms of rejecting this application in line with officer recommendations proposed by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Quirk. I would move to the vote. All those in favour of the motion?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And against?
1, 2.
And I will be abstaining, as I have developed a convention of so doing, as followed by my forebear. So in which case that is carried and it is rejected. Thank you. I'm conscious that our next agenda item is probably going to be a long one. It is very warm, so I would suggest we take a 10-minute intermezzo. So we will return at 5:10. Thank you. Well, it's gone 10 past, so I will call committee to order and we will proceed with the next agenda item, which is Land North of Stean Road, application number 23/01920/FUL. The presentation will be given by Mr. Chick, so I will invite him to commence. Thank you.
Councillors, microphone, you can never hear me without it. Right then. So the application site is located to the southwest of Bembridge. The application site here is shown with the red line that I put round, just for the locational purposes on the aerial photograph there, and then the red dot showing it on an OS map. What you can see is the proximity of the site to the village centre. So helpfully on this image, it shows where the village inn is. And then just beyond there, where Church Road starts, the village centre is in this location. And then just for information purposes, Stean Park is where the red dot is at the moment that's moving around. And of course, Bembridge Windmill, which I've got some photographs of later, is located to the south of the site. There we go. It didn't want to move for a moment. So just some information here. As you will have seen in the update paper, there was a slight error in the officer report in that the distances between the site and the village centre is 500 metres. From memory, the report said it's 430, so it's 500. And then the furthest point of the site down here near to Stean Road is 730 metres from the site. And then this is just the actual location plan of the site showing the actual red line area of the application site. And so it's showing the route there just off towards Woodland Grove, and also a route here that adjoins Stean Road. This slide is showing the designations that relate to the site. So I'll just go through them in order that the key on the left-hand side shows. So the Rural Service Centre boundary is this thick line here on the edge of Woodland Grove, which means that the application site, which is this site here, is immediately adjacent to the site. To the Rural Service Centre boundary. There's a mineral safeguarding area in the locality. That's this brown hatching here, which covers half of the site of the western field. And then the purple dots, the third down on that key, are tree protection orders. So they are individual trees that are protected for their high amenity value. Then there are other tree protection order types. So there's a group TPO at the top of the site here in the central point, which councillors will have seen when they visited the site, which aligns the edge of Pelham Close here. And there's an area TPO just to the west of the site. And then the bright green that you can see on the map, this is the open space, and the biggest open space there obviously is Stean Park Recreation Ground. There's also a Solent Wader and Brent Goose candidate site located to the south of the site here. And in terms of listed buildings, that is the grey dot surrounded by a red line. It's not completely clear on this plan, but those listed buildings are the Windmill, which is grade 1, Stean House down to the south here, grade 2 listed, then Mill Farm and its barn, also grade 2 listed, and a property opposite to the site here is also a listed building within that tree area. Moving swiftly on then, in terms of photographs, I've taken a few photographs around the site just to show the roads around the site, and then we'll move on to internal site photographs. So the orange arrows show where I've taken those photographs from. So the first slide here on the top left-hand side is a photograph looking toward the site in a northwesterly direction. So the application site starts around the point of where that red dot is there. And then I've just shown how Stean Road looks in this location. I think most councillors visited the site back in January, February time for an application we had at Stean Road. So you're probably quite aware of how it looks in Steed Road, but that would be the location around here where the cycle footpath link would come through from the bottom of the site. And then looking at the actual area of the proposed cycle path and footpath link. So that is this gravel track between the fences between these properties on Stein Road, and beyond you can see the trees in the application site. And this shows exactly where it comes out near to this property. I can't remember the number of it, I'm afraid. So moving off in a clockwise direction, this is looking at Mill Lane, or Mill Road, sorry, and the character of that area. So you have hedgerows either side the highway and landmark trees. Most of them are protected. And then moving round into the high street, photographs here. This photograph is just showing the corner here, which is in the location of the red cursor here, which takes you down the bridleway towards the windmill. And then stood in the same location, I've literally just turned around and looked to the north towards the high street and then walked a bit further on. And this junction here is Woodland Grove, which is the opening to this estate here, which leads into Pelham Drive. Then some photographs from internally within the application site, which is made up of existing agricultural fields, which have got quite an open character. And these photographs are taken from about the centre point of the western field, what I've called the western field within the report. And this shows the landmark trees and woodland in around Stein Lodge, which is the listed building just at the point of the red cursor here. And also the trees on the corner of the road near to the bridleway that takes you down to the windmill. And you can just see in the background there, Mill Cottage, which is a white painted house on the corner of the road. Again, moving clockwise onwards, my orange arrows have moved for some reason, I don't know why. But anyway, the point of the cursor now is where I was stood. And that is looking towards the properties on the corner of Woodlands Close as you come in, sorry, Woodland Grove, as you come into that area, and which back onto the application site. You can see they've got quite open views across the application site. And this photograph is just slightly turning, again clockwise, just to look at the relationship between those houses as they continue up Woodland Grove and the trees and hedgerow that are there between them. Just moving further along the same boundary then, these are two properties located adjacent to the site just here. They are shallow bungalows, they're semi-detached, very close to the application site boundary, protected trees here, but close to the site boundary, and obviously even their ground floor windows can look in towards the application site. And this photograph is just taken the other side of the protected woodland here, which shows those trees that start to form the central boundary between the east and western field. And just as a marker, that red wall there is the side elevation of this property, and then looking towards the properties here in Pelham Drive. And then this photograph is just showing the remainder of the boundary, which is the northeastern boundary of this part of the field. And this is showing the second half of it here in this location, looking towards the properties in this location, which is called Oaklands Gardens. So numbers 1 and 2 Oakland Gardens. One is a 2-storey house with first floor windows overlooking the site, quite a thick hedge here. And then a shallow bungalow, more modern dwelling, which has its side elevation wall on towards the application site. And this is just showing a slightly longer view towards those properties, and then trees that occupy the corner as the site turns towards the southeast. And that's a zoomed in photograph of the same image. I'll then turn clockwise. These are the rear elevations of properties within Stein Road. They obviously face onto Stein Road, and their gardens face over the application site towards those fields. And then the photograph in the left-hand top corner of this slide is just an oblique view of those properties you've just looked at, and then showing the side garden hedge there of a property called Osney Cottage, which is about the point of the cursor here.
That's the rear elevation of Osney Cottage. It faces onto Mill Road. And this is the side elevation, which faces northwest across the application site. And later on in the presentation, I've got some slides which show the relationship that would occur if this application was approved. And then these photographs are just showing the change in development character to the south of the application site. So you can see at the point of the cursor here, Steam Farm. These are the roofs of the Aquos barns, Dutch barns. And then further on, you can just about see the buildings further down towards Steam Farm. And this photograph is looking across here towards the central boundary and the edge of the barn at Steam Farm, which is at the point of the red cursor here. Thought it was important to show some images of the windmill and its relationship to the surrounding area. So obviously this photograph is taken within the open space. This is National Trust land just off to the southwest of the windmill. And so the application site would be beyond these trees, beyond this tree line. And then from the opposing view, where the top arrow is in this image, looking down towards the window, and the sails are just in that location there. That's the sails of the windmill. And then when one is within the bridleway, it takes you to the windmill. So walking off of Mill Lane, walking down this little lane here. That's me stood here looking back towards the application site. And these are the treetops of trees that are in the application site. And then these photographs are taken from a gate, which is next to the entrance to the windmill. So through that gate, you can see views. It's quite narrow, but you can see views towards the application site. There is an intervening hedge in those views that crosses this field. So the hedge is just here. And then you can see the roadside hedge of this field and then the trees of the application site beyond it. And then this photograph is just looking a bit further on. So you can see as a marker, this tree here is the tree here in the photograph I've just described to you. And it's looking off towards Steam Farm. So moving into the actual proposals, the application is for 130 houses on a site of 6.3 hectares or just over 6.3 hectares. 46 of those would be affordable houses. And they would be laid out in slightly different manners across the application site, as I've explained in the report. So the western field would have a much more Georgian appearance to it, with larger landmark properties. There would be an area of green space so that the houses in this location would be set back approximately 50 metres from this hedgerow, with the windmill another 130 metres off to the southwest. There would be a proposed central access lane in this location here, and I've got obviously some better plans that are more zoomed in to show that. And then there would be a central square located within the centre of the site, just here, with properties surrounding it. And then properties also off into these areas with parking areas behind the houses onto the square and the main central avenue into the application site. The eastern field would be developed in a different manner. Those properties, as you'll see with the housing types in a moment, would have a more cottage-like appearance, what I've called Victorian cottage-like appearance in the report. And they would be laid out in a slightly less formal and rigid manner, with the hard surfaces that form the vehicle and pedestrian access through the site and the parking areas being shared surfaces, with some of those properties hard up to, all of the properties actually hard up to those areas to overlook the parking areas and create a slightly different sense of place, I suppose you'd say. In the southeastern corner of the site would be another area of open space with a balancing pond. And again, I'll show you a slightly zoomed in version of that in a moment. So this is the plan form of the proposed development. This is the western field. And again, just a snapshot, slightly zoomed in of the image that you've just seen. And then this is just showing the plan form of the eastern field in this location. And you see that the houses proposed are up against these boundaries. to the northeast. And I'll just zoom back and show that again. The house is proposed here alongside Woodland Grove. And then I think this slide shows maybe slightly more illustratively the layout of the site. So obviously the white areas are the proposed houses. Those on the corners of the avenue here and the square would be 3-storey, with the remainder being 2-storey terraces. And I'll show you those housing types in a moment. But what you can see is a network of open spaces and gardens and proposed tree planting, hedge planting in these slides. And then this just shows the open spaces through the site. I have cut off this area because it doesn't show a lot, but there would be an open space in this location, which I'll show in a moment. But this is just showing the open spaces through the middle of the site. So the protected trees would all be retained. Much of the hedgerow would be retained. I've got a slide in a moment just to show the hedgerows which would be changed as a result of the development. And there is a proposed pond in this location, which for some reason shows green on this slide. So the actual roads into the site would be arranged in a hierarchical structure. What's called the secondary roads, the main roads into the site, would be these orange dashed lines, and this proposed access would form a central avenue with the in lane here at the top and the outline on the bottom. And there would be physical restrictions within that lane to mean that traffic coming out of the Westernfield could not turn right into the high street. It would have to circulate down through Mill Road and then up through Steen Road and then Forelands Road to get to the village centre. Then there would be what's called the local streets, where the buildings are slightly closer together, which would be the main network in this section of the site. And then the proposed tertiary roads, which are these blue dashed roads, which look a little bit like the purple ones in this location. In addition, throughout the site, there would be a mixed-use path, which would be for cycling and pedestrians. That would join up to the high street here near Woodlands Grove, go all around the outside section of the site, and also allow the crossing point to the windmill. And again, I have more detailed plans of those in a moment. And then just showing the local street structure for the eastern part of the site, which would have that smaller cottage, more intimate feel. And what you can see here is that the cycle path stroke pedestrian link continues along the southern boundary, then it moves up and is proposed to come through this area, which I showed you in the photographs earlier on Steen Road. Given some of the questions that were asked on Friday, I thought it would be quite important to show where the affordable housing, 46 affordable houses are proposed to be shown through the site. So the proposal is that these affordable houses would be spread throughout the site, the majority in the Easternfield, but some spread throughout the development site, which is generally considered to be a better form of planning. Believe the applicant is a registered provider of affordable housing, and so maybe not subject to the normal constraints of having to put everything together for another housing provider. And then this is just showing the eastern section of the site, where the majority of the affordable housing would be, a lot of it being affordable rented, proposed, and that's something that would be agreed through the legal agreement, as is normal. So just some slides showing the proposed means of access in a little bit more detail. As I said earlier on, the proposed access would be onto Mill Road for the Westernfield. There would be a physical restriction here so that any vehicles leaving the site would have to turn left or south in the high street and go off towards Steen Road and Forelands Road if they wanted to get back into the village centre, or indeed off to Sandown Road and out to other places. And then this is the proposed access priority junction onto Mill Road, which should serve the eastern part of the field, so that smaller section of the site, and that would just direct straight into this area of the site. And there would be a pedestrian link through this section at the midpoint of the site to allow people to be able to walk between the two, but that wouldn't be a road access. And then these slides just show the pedestrian improvements that are proposed. So the mixed path would branch off a pedestrian link to link over to Benbridge Windmill. And then the other link is the crossing point in Steen Road to allow those coming through the cycle and walking link there, pedestrian link, to cross the road and go off into Steen Road, either towards Forelands Road or through another development site which is resolved for approval, where that mixed use path is to go through that site and off towards Hillway Road. So as part of those highway works, there would be hedgerow removal at the site. So these purple dashes here show the proposed hedgerow removal onto the high street. So that would be 150 metres of hedgerow here. This part of the site is slightly banked compared to the high street. So there would be a grassed bank down to the high street at this point with the houses set above it. So changes in levels here is around 1.5 metres, and it gradually continues to slope down so that it's level with the highway around this point here. There's also a section here proposed to be widened. There is an existing access here and it's proposed to widen it, so there will be 25 metres of hedgerow removed there, and a further 12 metres here proposed to be removed to form that pedestrian link that I showed you earlier on, and then small sections of hedgerow in this location to allow the mixed path to go through into that road link into Steen Road. The application also proposes some changes to the high street itself. These reflect changes proposed through the LC WIP, which is the local cycling and walking strategy for Brading, St Helens and Benbridge. And Benbridge has some proposed changes which this scheme looks to basically put into place. And they would include some build outs in the existing highway so that there would be restricted movement for vehicles coming two-way, which is an issue at the moment. And so there'd be a giveaway point here so that vehicles coming out of the village could continue unhindered. And obviously those vehicles waiting here would then proceed onwards once those vehicles have gone. But the point of that is it allows a build out so that there can be an unbroken pedestrian route through the high street, all the way down to Church Road, where there currently isn't one at the moment. There is an existing pedestrian route that goes through Woodland Grove and then on towards the high street, but it's broken at this point, and that's what these proposals have put forward. And so what I've just shown you is what the LC WIP says in this location about footway widening, short section of priority working, some narrowing sections to provide vehicular passing places, and the likely cost in 2022 was just over £220,000. And now I'm going to show you some of the types of the houses. The housing types, there are more, but these are the basic types where there are slight variations on these, which mean, some have got hooded porches, some have got their downpipes in different places, some have got slightly different window types. So some have, in this case, four pane casement windows, others have sashes, that kind of thing. But these are examples of the various housing types. So this is housing type A, which is the proposed cottage type development housing, which would take place throughout the site, but mainly in the eastern field. Then moving on to a slightly more Georgian appearance. This one's got a pyramidal roof, and it shows how Georgian windows would look in these houses. But again, this is just one of the house types within the house type B. Then moving on to a slightly different variation of that, just to show how it would be with the casement windows and the different material. There'd be a mix of painted elevations, brickwork, and stonework. And then this is one of the house types proposed within the eastern field. This would be in the southeastern section of the eastern field near the pond. So a terrace of 4 properties. And then I've run out of memory for what the house type is on this one. I think it's house type E. But again, similar pair of cottages here with the rounded door types, sash windows. This is one of the more Regency properties that would face onto the square and be within the western field. And then this is an example of the 3-storey properties which I showed you just now on the plan, that would be located on the corner as sort of legible marks on the corners of the square and the entrance into the site. And then just showing a terrace of 3 properties here and how these would look. This property here has an entrance off to the side to make this look as 1 property. It's actually 2, and with another property on the end here. And you can see on the floor plan the terrace nature of those, which are 2-bedroom properties. And then another variation, just showing another variation design of the pairs of properties. Again, this one looks like 1 big house, but it's not. It's got a side entrance, and you can see on the floor plans there the nature of these properties. And then another of the proposed terrace types for the eastern field. We're nearly there, I think, with the house types. And then the slightly more formal appearance of the pairs of semi-detached properties that would be within the western field. And then one of the housing types, again, within the eastern field and partly within the western field. Another one of the two-story pairs. No, sorry, this is detached house variation of those. And then another of the terrace types. And then this is a slightly different design type. These properties have got the double gabled feature here, showing how these properties would be arranged to more or less look as 1 property, but actually they're actually 2. And then again, another one of the pairs of slightly larger properties. One of the detached properties. Another of the detached properties there. These are a pair of semi-detached properties proposed on the northern elevation of the western field, which have been designed in a certain way to try and lessen impacts on nearby properties. And I've shown that in another slide in a moment, so you can see the relationship. Terraced example of properties again here. Slightly handed version of that. And a slightly larger version of a detached property there with accommodation in the roof. One of the terrace properties that will align the central avenue that will come into the application site. And a variation on the 3-story properties that would overlook the high street. Another of the detached properties. And these are the proposed versions of the garages for the application site, which signifies the end of looking at all of those property types. And then there's some visuals, which I did include a link within the committee report, but when I tried to use it yesterday, it didn't actually work. So I hope it worked for you, but if it doesn't, these were online, but I have included all of the visuals in the presentation just in case you didn't see them. So the top left-hand slide is showing view from the high street, slightly elevated level, obviously. So you can see the 3-story properties that would be form the entrance to the application site, looking down the inroad here and the outroad with the terrace properties in between. And this avenue would have a pedestrian link through the middle with trees planted in the centre of that avenue. And then you've got some visuals looking into the actual square, which is at the top of this avenue, in this location here. And again, you can see 3-story properties forming the edges of that square. And this is the same property at a slightly different angle, showing the railings around the square, and another 3-story property on the corner. And then this is a view of the public green where the red cursor is here. This is the green that's proposed to be opposite to the windmill. So set back and opposite to the windmill. You remember that the mixed-use path came through here and had a little branch off towards the crossing point. So this is the properties that would overlook that area to give natural surveillance. And then some examples of how the properties would look within the lanes, just to show how they'd be arranged and how their front entrances and front gardens would be close on to these shared access areas. And then some street scenes just to show how the application site would look from the high street. So these properties are the properties I showed you right back at the beginning onto Woodland Grove. And this is showing how those properties next to it would look, the Regency type properties with their garages either side. They would have their own accesses onto the high street. And then these are the properties either side of the central avenue. And then just showing a slightly different angle from the high street, showing the 3-storey properties and how the relationship between the 2-storey properties, and then how the terrace of properties would look alongside one side of the high street or the main avenue into the site. And then this is just showing them in a sort of a bare line form, similar street scenes. And then just to show you where the 3-storey properties were, because there are several throughout the site. So the green shows 2-storey properties. As I said, on the corners of the square, there's one tucked in this location here. This point here is a vista point towards the windmill. So there's a gap there. And if you stood in the square, you'd be able to see the windmill in a similar way that I showed in my photograph, but with a lot of housing around you, obviously. And then 2 3-storey properties in this location here. Those with an orange roof are 2.5-storey properties. If you remember, I showed you those with accommodation in the roof. And then the rest of the purple is the 2-storey properties. And then just to show that in the eastern field, all of the properties would be 2-storey, so those smaller properties. And I just wanted to show you the house types that would be close to the properties into Woodland Grove in this location. I'm sorry for all the multiple arrows. I couldn't think of a better way to do it. So this elevation is the 3-storey house adjacent to Woodland Grove property on the corner here, which would have a blank elevation. And then these property types here are those that would face properties in this location. So these properties all would have first floor windows, whereas this property here is designed to have no side elevation windows at first floor here, and it would front onto this point of this lane. This is a blank elevation for this property type here, which would face onto an existing property there. And then in the report, you will see like I have outlined the potential impact on the 2 properties which you saw in the photograph, which was those shallow bungalows that have rear elevation windows that look over the application site close to the site boundary. So it's proposed to have a 2-metre high fence here with a woodland ecology buffer in between. And this house type is proposed in this location just off to the south from those properties, and that will be the relationship. So these are 2-bedroom windows, one for one property and one for another in that location. And then just showing here the sort of relationship between 30 Woodland Grove, which is here, and the property types opposite to it. And then this is showing number 26 Woodland Grove, which is over here, over here, and the property types here, the terrace property types in this location. And moving further into the site, this is just showing the site boundary to the properties in this location. This is the northeastern boundary of the eastern field. So this is the trees I showed you in the photograph, which are all retained in the woodland in that location. And these are the proposed house types. So you can see again, bedroom windows at this location for this house type P1, looking towards this much denser boundary here, the trees to be retained. And then this house type is showing the first floor windows there that would look towards this property known as Leafy Oaks in that location. And these cross sections show you the relationship between Leafy Oaks, if you remember, in this location here, and this cross section is showing towards number 54. And then just to show you the house type here, they're all the same, fortunately. So I don't have to bore you with too many in this location, but this is, again, first floor windows, serve bedrooms, looking towards number 2, Oakland Gardens, which is this property here, which has got a side elevation in that location. And then this property here would have a parking area in this location, so no houses in front of its first floor windows there. And just showing you the relationship between the properties in Steen Road. Obviously, they have longer gardens in this location. It's proposed to have a planting strip in this location, an ecological buffer. And this is the first floor elevation windows, all bedrooms again, from this terrace of 3, looking towards these properties. And then house type P2, very similar to the other property types, looking towards these properties here. And then this, as I showed you before, is the relationship or the design of these properties. More importantly, this is the side elevation of these properties just here towards Osney Cottage and the properties that are further adrift from the location. And the application is recommended for approval, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chick. We move then to the public speaking elements of the agenda item. In a change to the published agenda, Mr. Jeremy Hine will not be speaking. So if I could invite Mr. David Groom.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes, no, Councillor.
I would like to raise a point of order, if I may.
You may.
Thank you. And that's this, that when members of the committee came into this meeting, there was a significant, I would suggest, update provided by the officer in the case in relation to this application. And it deals with a number of, as far as I can see, and I've been trying to do it whilst the meeting's been going on and still listen to the applications. But as far as I can see, a lot of the information there, and indeed some of the documents there, have not been disclosed. It's a response to Build a Better Bembridge's letter. As far as I'm aware, it's not been disclosed to them, this update. And so we will be making decisions, arguably, based on information that they've not received. And indeed, the people of the members of the public who wish to address the committee won't have had the advantage or disadvantage of seeing this information. I think that in my submission is a worrying point of order. The other submission that I have on a point of order is this, that I think it was either today or yesterday, it appeared on the website that there was a request by Bembridge Parish Council for a deferment to consider a point of law that was taken at the judicial review of Westridge, which is said to be relevant to this deliberation. And before we go into that, isn't it necessary, before we go into the application, isn't it necessary to resolve both matters? So the additional information and the public not having had access to it contained in this update. And secondly, whether or not we would agree to a deferment.
Thank you, Councillor Spink. Yes, I've considered the matter in the sense of the representations made by Bembridge Council. To my mind, I think there is sufficient information before us. And notwithstanding the fact that there has been an update, I do think that colleagues, decision makers, essentially have the ability, of course, to defer an application if they feel that there is not sufficient, or indeed if they feel that the public may not be making representations which they otherwise would. Now, I appreciate that that is very much against what you were potentially suggesting, but I mean, essentially, I've taken legal advice, considered this in some depth, and would also be looking to colleagues at Planning Committee, being senior councillors, to see whether they have any other, as it were, echoing of your concerns. So I would invite colleagues, if there are any concerns, to raise those. To my mind, and I appreciate that, as it were, the buck stops here at Chair, that I could defer this item, having had legal advice, having considered the matter, I'm content to proceed, but I'm certainly alive to any concerns that colleagues may have, and I'm looking around the chamber and I'm seeing people shaking their heads. I don't know if there's anybody who wishes to add anything at all, but unless there is, I will proceed. Councillor Quirk, I'll bring you in. I will come back to you, Councillor Spink. Councillor Quirk.
Can Mr. Gard give us a response in terms of the point of law that they are saying is raised by the Westridge inquiry that is relevant here, and to give us an opinion as to whether that is actually relevant here?
Thank you, Councillor Quirk. Mr. Gard, are you able to?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I can't, Councillor Quirk, because I don't know what the point that they're raising is. What I can say to you is this. There is no decision issued in that case, and I think its relevance at this point it's not particularly helpful to us, I don't think, that case. I mean, I'd look to the Planning Authority to make any comment if they disagree with me. I'm not clear on what the suggestion is as to how that case might link with this one. That is a matter that's before the court It was a rolled up permission hearing and is yet to be determined by the court, firstly, as to whether or not permission should be granted. And even if permission should be granted, what the substantive outcome would be. It raises issues that are very relevant to that application. It raises nothing that is of general relevance to this application. Save us for some procedural points, which the local planning authority is very alert to. I mean, we're at a stage now where the application here hasn't even gone to you for debate or for your consideration. And so some of the grounds on the judicial review that we faced in that case was around the procedure that was used. I can't talk to that because it hasn't come to you yet. So I can't talk to the specific points because I don't know what the point that was made was. But I do think it's of limited assistance. And as I say, the matter's before the court and we don't have a decision, and I can't tell you when we might get one.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. I mean, I'm certainly keen to avoid speculation, but I'll ask Councillor Quirk, and I will come back to you, Councillor Spink. Councillor Quirk, you had a supplementary.
Just to confirm my understanding of what you just said, is that the point of law has not been determined by the courts.
Yes, that is correct. Albeit I still don't know what the point of law that might make it relevant to this application is. But yes, the High Court is yet to make a decision on the Westlake Park judicial review. That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Guard. Councillor Spink.
Yeah, I can be of some assistance, I think. In the update that is given to us, it details that no details of Section 106 agreements have been disclosed. Now, the point at the judicial review, and I went to that, as did at least one other person on this committee, at the judicial review, the point was taken that as a matter of law, this local planning authority should be disclosing Section 106 agreements and draft Section 106 agreements, or at very least the terms of a proposed agreement as prior to the committee determining the matter. Now, that was a point of law which was taken and would be applicable to all planning applications of all, I would suggest, committees, not limited to Westridge. As far as the point of law is concerned, the judge reserved on his entire judgment for 4 weeks. That period of time is up in about 3 or 4 days' time. And it seems to me folly. I've looked up the legislation. I can tell you there is legislation to the effect that local planning authorities should disclose the Section 106, and it should be available for public consultation. Now, the update of the officer's comment given to us when we came in this evening, the update says, well, it's dealt with in the officer's report. Well, it may be my fault, because I've been trying to look at it, as I say, whilst listening to other matters, but I can't find that. And secondly, even as it is, it should be part of the public consultation. And that was the point that the judge was making. So I just think it's folly, if I may say so, given that there's to be a High Court ruling, which may be applicable to this case, for us to go ahead.
Address that.
Thank you. Councillor Spink, I'm going to invite Mr. Guard to speak on that point. Mr. Guard.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the reason that I'm grateful to Councillor Spink for clarifying the point that was raised. It's quite right that the Development Management Procedure Order identifies a process whereby local planning authorities are under an obligation to place onto the planning register heads of terms of legal agreements and draft obligations at the point that they're received from applicants. What I would say in this case is that no draft planning obligation has been received, and of course the heads of terms are published as part of this report. So they fall to you all to decide today. And the heads of terms, if I turn to the recommendation of officers in this report, it specifically refers to the need for a Section 106 agreement in this case. So of course the detail of the heads of terms that are required in this case are specifically referred to, and it's at the recommendation on page 39, where it said the conditional permission subject to a legal agreement securing provision of affordable housing, and it goes on, and that forms part of this report here. And all that remains for me to say, Chairman, is that it being raised as a point of order leaves it to you to determine on, and it's not necessarily for it isn't for the committee to debate it. And so if you're happy to proceed on that basis, you can make that ruling and we can move on to the presentation.
May I just, I'm sorry to delay things, but it is
If you
important.
could,
May I
through the
respond?
chair, please, Councillor.
No, I was going to say, may I respond? Thank you. The point is that the saying that the heads of agreement can be determined tonight isn't the practice of this local planning authority. When we discuss, for example, the details, usually on planning committee, we are told that that's a matter for the Section 106 agreement and that planning committee doesn't voice a view about it. That's the practice. Now, that is contrary to the legislation. I'm trying to stop this committee, stop this local planning authority being subjected to another judicial review and costing the public a considerable amount of money. I'm trying to keep us on the straight and narrow. And I think for this reason, it should be adjourned. And secondly, although I respect your ruling, Chair, on the other point, a number of the documents referred to in this update are not on the website. There's no HRA on the website, and yet it's referred to in the document. There's no updated hedge regulations assessment, although it's referred to in the document. I could go on, but I'm not going to because of time.
I appreciate it. I think certainly, as I have said in relation to that element, I do feel that there is enough information within the public domain for colleagues to make a determination. I am going to take advice from Ben Gard in relation to the legislation that you cite, and we'll make a ruling on that basis. So I'm just going to turn to my colleagues and we'll come back to you.
Chair, forgive me interrupting, but may I can help with the reference to the statutes if it's of assistance.
Appreciate, Councillor. I'm just going to confer to colleagues first, and I may well come back to you. But thank you. Whilst my colleague Ben Gard, our legal officer, is making an exploration of the legislation, I'm going to invite our case officer to talk about the hedgerow issue, and that will fill up a little bit of time. Mr. Chick.
Yes, thank you. So councillors, the hedgerow issue was commented on by the archaeological officer on the 8th of July, and I'll read you what the archaeological officer has said. Tree officer has recommended that hedgerows are assessed under hedgerow regulations. We have considered this in more detail, and it is unlikely that the hedgerows would fall under the regulations on archaeological grounds alone. Hedgerows. Sorry, I'm speaking as loud as I can. Hedgerows within and around the boundary of the site do not incorporate archaeological features, nor are they situated wholly or partly within our archaeological site or on the land adjacent or associated with a site, which is either a scheduled monument or recorded in the SMR at the time of the Act. However, the HLC data suggests that field patterns may have originated as a coaxial field system or prehistorical or Roman date. As detailed in my previous memo, this should be considered in further archaeological evaluations should the proposal be granted consent. The desk-based assessment has not identified the hedgerows to be of historical importance under the criteria of the hedgerow regulations, but any hedgerow assessment should consult the Record Office on this specific matter to clarify the hedgerows fall under Part 2, Schedule 1 of the Act. So the issue has been covered, and our ecological officer has advised us that the hedgerows don't contain a suitable amount of a species of plants to be ecologically significant.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Quirk. Oh, sorry, Spink, beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chair. There is then on the papers a conflict, if I may say so, between the tree officer. The tree officer hasn't advised. He's raised the issue. He's not advised about the regulations. There's a conflict, therefore, on the papers. And I don't know, but I mean, I may have just misheard Mr. Chick, but is he saying it's been assessed for archaeological reasons? Because that's very different to ecological reasons or ecology reasons.
Thank you, Mr. Chick.
So the comment I've read out to you is our planning archaeologists' comment, and that is.
If I could ask members of the public not to, I appreciate it, it may be frustrating, but we do need to keep things, as it were, fairly ordered. Thank you. Mr. Chick.
Those comments were made by the archaeologist who does the assessment in terms of historical hedgerows, whether they're historically important or not. And also our archaeologists' comments have reflected on the fact that it's not a species-rich area. So the tree officer has made a comment saying that should be checked. He doesn't make the assessment as to whether they're historic hedgerows or not. And officers consider that assessment has been made by the officers who would do so for us in normal situations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I feel essentially this is something which can be ventilated further in the debate to the extent to which there is sufficient information before us, whether there are contradictions, and indeed, if we feel therefore something might be unsafe as issuing from that information. But I take your point. I'm just going to speak with Mr. Gard, and then we will move forwards on a determination one way or another.
Would it assist if I give you the references to the law so that we can be clear that everything's been checked?
I think Mr. Gard has found the relevant legislation. Thank you then.
We could do. I think it's important. Yes, me.
Right, I'm going to invite Mr. Gard to speak on that point, and I will make a determination. Thank you, Mr. Gard.
Thank you, Chairman. So limited again to the point around the Section 106 agreement. This point's addressed at Article 40 of the Town and Country Planning Development Management Procedure Order of 2015, and it says in relation to applications for a full planning permission that the planning register must contain, in respect of every application for planning permission related to the local planning authorities, local planning register authorities area, a copy of, I'm going to scroll down to it because there's a bit of a list here, a copy of any planning obligation or Section 106 agreement entered into in connection with any decision of the local planning authority or the Secretary of State in respect to the application, and a copy of any other planning obligation or Section 278 agreement taken into account by the local planning authority. And the point that I made earlier stands, Chairman, and I offer no further legal advice on it, save as to say this, that there is no draft Section 106 agreement planning obligation yet in relation to this development. There is a slight difference to be made in respect of when the point at which the resolution is made, and it's quite common at this committee, and this being one of them, where the matters that go into the Section 106 agreement, the heads of terms on the planning obligation, fall to this committee to form part of the debate. And once the committee here make a resolution, if it is minded to grant planning permission, subject to planning conditions and planning obligations under heads of terms, amended from time to time as the committee sees fit, then that will go into a draft planning obligation, which will then make its way onto the planning authority's register. And then a final version of the planning obligation will also appear as well. So on that point alone, I don't believe that there is a breach of that regulation, of that order in respect to this application as yet. As I said, it will appear in due course once a draft planning obligation is made in respect of the heads of terms that are discussed by this committee if it is minded to enter into a planning obligation. And Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Gard. On that basis, and mindful of the fact that we are a quasi-judicial making authority, we're not bound necessarily in any event to follow what is handed down in legal proceedings, which may not necessarily be germane. And the fact that essentially what we have determined before has fallen down to a ventilation of what Section 106 may come to amongst us. I think there is a distinction to be made between making a planning decision today and then the issuing of that to move forward by the planning authority. What I'm struggling to understand is the potential prejudice, which presumably the judge, and obviously not wishing to refer to legal proceedings in any great detail, but I'm just still trying to understand the prejudice that would accrue to us. And I will invite you, Councillor Spink, to address that point very briefly, if you will.
The prejudice that was argued at the judicial review was that the public should have an opportunity of being consulted on the Section 106 agreement because it is a material planning consideration. And the principle that this planning authority carries out denies the public that opportunity to comment on the agreed heads, because unlike most, if not all planning authorities, most planning authorities have at least the draft 106 agreement on the website for public comment before the committee sits. And this planning authority, according to arguments put forward, which I appreciate have not been determined yet, is operating by leaving it to us to raise points which the planning officers then put in a decision notice, are denying the public, and therefore it's prejudicial to the public to have their comments on it. That was the point that was made. And in my view, for what it's worth, that point stands from the arguments put forward, a great deal of support in terms of law from the arguments put forward at the judicial review. Now, if the judicial review comes judgment comes soon, and it should do. It would be a great shame if this local authority has wrongly interpreted the legislation, and I suggest it has.
Thank you, Councillor Spink. My view is essentially that, notwithstanding the points you've made, that these are potentially obiter comments by the judge. We are able to make a decision tonight. That does not necessarily mean that it's issued, and therefore it can be stopped before it goes towards issuance. And I think on that basis, I'm happy to proceed. But I will invite Councillor Brodie to speak, as he did have his hand up. Councillor Brodie.
Thank you, Chair. I was the other councillor who was at the court case in Southampton regarding the Westacre situation. The key thing, the key issues as far as I'm concerned, and obviously everything's open to interpretation. The key thing as far as I'm concerned, firstly, Councillor Spink says that most, if not all, local authorities have the Section 106, at least in draft form, on their registers. But the key thing is not all. That is something that in my time on this committee, we've never done. We've never, ever. We've generally formulated the Section 106 key issues for us at this committee. Before us today, we have a recommendation. It addresses some of the issues that may concern us. It also has a list of conditions that will address some of those issues. There are elements of that, if I was minded to support this application, where I would be proposing amendments to that recommendation. That is something I would hope to have support for. But the key thing is, and I think it's very important that I say this, the judge made no determination on the 1st and 2nd of July. We're still waiting for that. It was the claimant who argued this point very vociferously. It wasn't necessarily accepted by the judge. We won't know that until he makes his decision. That is expected sometime this week, I would guess. I mean, 4 weeks today was when the case finished, and he said it would be 4 weeks. But it's a judicial review about a particular application. I'm not sure what effect that has on the application that's before us tonight, to be frank. I mean, you could also say, and I'll just address this, you know, the NPPF, for instance. I mean, as I understand it, though I can't say that for definitely it's referred to in a lot of the documentation, the new Secretary of State has issued a new NPPF today, I believe. I'm not sure, maybe not, or is intending to, you know, in terms of addressing the housing problems that we're facing in the United Kingdom at this moment in time. One of the things I would say, if you're going to start going down the road of wanting a draft Section 106 agreement before this committee, we're never going to get anything done. Under this government, we're going to lose local control. We will be put into special measures, and we will have no authority over what's happening in terms of planning. That's the last thing I want to see in my final years on this council, and I hope the rest of you do too. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. I am content to proceed, so we will move now to the public speaking elements of this application. So if I could ask Mr. David Groom, you have 3 minutes to speak. Mr. Groom, thank you.
Thank you. The presumption in the NPPF in favour of sustainable development does not hold true where protecting an asset of particular importance provides a clear reason for refusing the application. Historic England, the National Trust, and the Council's own archaeological officer have all objected to the proposed development due to its harm to a Grade 1 listed asset. In paragraph 8.9 of the officer's report, it states the development would have a moderate to significantly harmful impact on the current rural and open character of the immediate area. Bembridge Windmill derives considerable significance from its landscape setting. The windmill's pastoral setting is key to how the public appreciate its historic and architectural significance, an appreciation which underpins its viability as a publicly accessible heritage asset. The proposed development would harm the significance of Bembridge Windmill and the nearby heritage assets by eroding the open rural character of its immediate setting, from which it derives an important aspect of its significance. Those are not my words. Those are the words of Historic England. Bembridge Windmill is in the top 2.5% of the most historic buildings in England and is, according to Historic England, the only complete example of the period in Great Britain. The building is therefore of exceptional historic interest. Historic England say the development poses harm to an unnecessary and unjustified degree, and the scheme therefore runs counter to your duties set out in the Planning Act and the NPPF, which require harm to be minimised and convincingly justified. Your own archaeological officer agrees with Historic England. The Isle of Wight Core Strategy, para 7.178, says heritage assets that are protected or nationally designated will be afforded the highest protection. How could allowing this development be in line with that? There is only one windmill on the island. There are more than one potential development sites. Historic England, the National Trust, your own archaeological officer, all object to this application on the basis of the harm it will cause to the windmill. You must listen to them and refuse this application.
Thank you, Mr. Groom. Well, I could ask members of the public, I appreciate this is obviously a very contentious application, but it also does prevent people from hearing on the screens at home. Thank you, though. If I can now invite Mr. Angus MacLeod, if you have 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Right, good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'd like to say that Councillor Spink has taken most of my thunder, for which I thank him and find very irritating as well. But at least thanks to Councillor Spink, you now know that there's significant doubt about a number of the documents that should have been on the website and appear not to be there. Not just the Section 106 agreement, the Habitats Regulation Assessment, and information relating to nitrate neutrality. They either are missing, haven't been made public, or appear to have been sidestepped. And importantly, Southern Water's crucial report on drainage and sewerage is due on the 7th of August. And it's hard to see how you can make a decision without that information. Captiva and BCM have played the game magnificently. They know all the rules, they've studied every angle, and they appear to have exploited every loophole and leveraged every contact that they have within the very cosy planning and development community on the Isle of Wight, possibly assisted by the fact that at least one of their number is a former Isle of Wight Council planning officer, and the fact that they've had open access, or appear to have had open access, to the planning department during the process of this application, a luxury not afforded to Joe Public. Is this the secret club where backroom deals are done, as reported in the LGA peer review? They produce glossy brochures and use every buzzword in an attempt to persuade you that this 130-house faux Georgian development on a greenfield site outside the village settlement boundary is going to be good for the Isle of Wight and good for the village. It's going to be sustainable. It's going to be in character. It will provide affordable housing, and there won't be any adverse effects or environmental damage, excess traffic, flooding, sewage, or pollution, and that the already overloaded village infrastructure can cope. This application will damage the island, and it will damage the village. It's harmful. It ignores the neighbourhood development plan. It will not provide any genuinely affordable housing. 80% of market value, the policy compliant term, is not affordable. Affordable housing is what an islander working an ordinary job, earning an ordinary island wage of about £25,000 a year can afford. I've seen no pricing information from Captiva, but as a comparator, you should be aware that 3-bed houses on the adjacent development start at £825,000, and a new build semi right next door is £325,000. You can't consider this application on its own. It must be considered in conjunction with the already approved 80+ houses in the area immediately adjacent to it. So this is actually about the cumulative effect of 200+ houses. That would mean that Bembridge would have about 40% of the total annual house target for the Isle of Wight, with 90% of those on greenfield sites. There's no genuine doctor's surgery. The nearest in St Helens is already oversubscribed by 200 people. There are no jobs, well, there are 4. There's no secondary school. There's no bank. There's 1 bus an hour. You can't park. Any economic benefit that accrues to the village will be temporary. This is going to generate an extra 1,100 vehicle movements per day. It will further overload the already creaking sewage and drainage system, which currently discharges each year up to 250 Olympic swimming pools worth of sewage directly into the waters of the Marine Conservation Zone. and this is not.
I will briefly allow you to finish if it is
I
just
would like to
literally a
finish,
sentence.
okay?
Yeah.
Southern Water openly acknowledged that the system is not up to it, and it will take significant work to make it capable.
Thank you, thank you. We turn now to Ms. Liz White from the Parish Council. Ms. White, you have 6 minutes whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Thanks, Russell. Before I start, can I just correct one thing? You talked about Steen Lodge being the grade 2 listed building behind the trees opposite the site. It is actually Bembridge Lodge, not Steen Lodge. If I could just make that correction. Thank you. Right. Bembridge Parish Council strongly objects to this application because it will harm the character of the area. 130 houses is overdevelopment of the site in terms of mass, scale and height. It harms the setting of 2 listed buildings, in particular the Grade 1 windmill, as confirmed by Historic England and the National Trust. It will have an unacceptable impact on the highway system and the creaking village infrastructure. This application must be considered against plan policies, not used as a means to drive through building of affordable houses, most of which will not be affordable to those on local wages, in an area with few jobs, limited public transport, and no demonstrated need in the village. There are currently 116 houses for sale, of which many have been on the market for some time. BNDP policy OL1 supports developments of up to 9 units outside or adjacent to the settlement boundary. That policy has been ignored in the push to achieve affordable housing. Bembridge is not against development and supports applications in line with the BNDP policies. Indeed, in 2017, the only affordable houses built on the Isle of Wight were in Bembridge. You have heard, and you know, that the Isle of Wight is subject to presumption in favour of development, but it is not a carte blanche to approve all applications. They can be refused if approval of such would cause harm. This will cause harm. There is no evidence of a positive impact upon this from this unacceptable scheme. This is a greenfield site. The developer is required to demonstrate how the scheme would enhance the character of the area in order to comply with policy SP1. Large sections of roadside hedgerow will be removed or laid. The Isle of Wight tree officer requested on the 2nd of July further details of planting predetermination. That has not been provided. So this scheme for 130 houses squeezed onto the 2 fields located close to the roadside edge, comprising blocks of 3-storey faux Georgian houses, unlike anything anywhere else in the village, the height, mass and scale of which will be clearly visible and have a heavily urbanising effect on the area, further evidence of harm. The proposal is at odds with the adjacent low-rise houses in Woodland Grove and the rural landscape of the adjacent AONB. A SHLA designation for this site suggests an allocation of 80 houses, not 130. This amounts to a 50% overdevelopment. The assessment agreed that the majority of the site was not within walking distance to school, shops and play area, leading to an over-reliance on travel by car. It recommended an allocated area in the scheme for allotments. Because a site receives the SHLA designation, doesn't guarantee planning approval. This proposal, which way exceeds the SHLA allocation in terms of house numbers and does not include space for allotments, should be refused. Although highways measures for improvements to the high street are included in this application, the increase in traffic movements on an already congested network, plus the accumulative impact of the recently approved development on Hillway, will have a negative impact on the High Street, Mill Road and Steen Cross roundabout, already the scene of several recent accidents and the sight lines of which were declared unsatisfactory in the LC WIP. In conclusion, Bembridge Parish Council urges members to refuse this wholly unsuitable scheme. Overdevelopment of site, impact on the heritage windmill and other listed buildings, urbanisation of the edge of the village, dangerous impact on local roads, insufficient mitigation for future sewage overflows, irreparable harm to the village infrastructure, which is already at breaking point, traffic congestion and lack of parking, no doctor's surgery, and the practice in St Helens oversubscribed. However, if the committee is minded to recommend approval, BPC notes that contributions have been agreed for highways improvements to the High Street and to the open space of Steam Park. Bembridge Parish Council would request that a condition was put on that these works should be undertaken before the site was inhabited.
Thank you, Ms. White. We turn now to Mr. James Pink, the applicant. Mr. Pink, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. My entire life, I've called Bembridge my home. I founded my business there, and it is with a deep sense of responsibility and community spirit that I stand here before you. When I first was presented this development opportunity, it was a site I knew a lot about in a village I love. But to the shock of my team, I said, no, it's not for us. Sure, it's a proposed allocated site, but it's a place where I live. Discussions continued around the office, and as I was leaving that afternoon, one of our youngest team members asked to talk to me. Emily is in her 20s. She has lived in the village her whole life. She went to university, got her degree, and decided to return home. She lives with her parents and dreams of raising a family in the village she calls home. I say dreams because fundamentally that's what it is for most young adults in Bembridge, a dream of owning their own house, owning somewhere secure that they can call home, somewhere where they can bring up children. So Emily asked me if I would reconsider my decision, and I listened. She said, the field was going to be built on, and yet we have the opportunity to do something special, try to achieve something for young people in the village. She left me with a closing line. If nothing is done, no houses are built. What happens? Prices will rise, and my opportunity of owning a house will disappear. Well, that gave me a thoughtful weekend. On Monday, I called the team together and said, we're going to develop that land, and we're going to do it right. So what is right? We couldn't be the only people struggling to challenge to deliver quality, affordable housing in affluent areas. After lots of research, Poundbury stood out as best in class and utilises heritage design with affordable at its core. We decided to reach out to the Duchy, and we were invited to have 2 days with them on site to really understand what did work and what didn't work. Simply put, the key to achieving affordability, it was to deliver a wide mix of housing with different size, different values, and not being afraid of density in pockets of the site. Fundamentally, enabling small numbers of large houses to cross-subsidise higher number of affordable houses. With affordability at the heart of this development, our proposal to deliver 35% affordable homes. But more importantly, it will also make open market homes more achievable for young islanders. This is not just about bricks and mortars, councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pink. Mr. Ian Delaney, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Bembridge is the largest village on the island, and according to this council's own evidence, scores the highest in the rural sustainability matrix. Despite this, it's seen the least growth compared to other rural service centres. This paradox raises important questions about our approach to development and community sustainability, and could go some way to explain why PO35 has become the most expensive postcode on the island. Bembridge is blessed with fantastic facilities. School, library, doctors, dentists, florists, butchers, fishmongers, chemists, pubs, hotels and restaurants. Yet with an ageing population, how will these amenities survive? Some argue that development should be denied in affluent coastal communities and instead be concentrated in areas like Newport or East Cowes. This approach is neither fair nor sustainable. Bembridge must share the responsibility of accommodating growth. In preparation of this application, we've engaged extensively with the community. Focus groups with local residents, meetings with Build a Better Bembridge and Joe Robertson, and an evening in the school hall have informed our plans. The process gave us 3 key themes people wanted us to address: affordability, design and heritage, and infrastructure, with a focus on flooding. As at all Captiva developments, we will deliver 35% affordable homes, with 70% of those for rent under a local lettings plan. Importantly, through thoughtful design, we aim to ensure 45% of the open market homes will be priced below the island average price and 80% below the Bembridge average price, making the site much more inclusive and accessible to islanders. With regards to design, we've embraced the guidance of the Bembridge Neighbourhood Plan and propose historical and architectural features that complement the existing character of the village. Design details reflect the traditional styles and materials found in Bembridge. Infrastructure improvements are funded by development, which support our schools, hospitals and local services. Our comprehensive drainage plan prevents surface water from entering the combined sewage system, reducing strain and increasing capacity, as noted in the recent statutory flood investigation paper. It's essential to recognise that resistance to development often comes from affluent lobbyists who already enjoy the security of owning a home or 2. It's noteworthy that Bembridge Parish Council has refused to meet with us. It's ironic that the group named Build a Better Bembridge seem not to support any building at all, and deeply troubling that they've resorted to publishing conspiracy theories that challenge the integrity of this council, this committee, the LPA and the development community on the island. It's clear their aim is to prevent development at any cost. They appear blind to the broader needs of the community and their minds are closed to consideration of the benefits development can bring. In conclusion, our vision for Middleton is to create a community that preserves the character of Bembridge whilst addressing its housing needs. We hope you can support it.
Thank you. We now turn to Councillor Ed Blake, who in a change to the agenda item will be speaking on behalf of Councillor Joe Robertson, who has presented his apologies to the committee. Councillor Blake, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, speaking on behalf of Councillor Joe Robertson, now MP, obviously has a reason why he's not here. So his words are, I wish to object to this application on the grounds that it is detrimental to the character of the local area, amounts to an overdevelopment of the site and fails to meet the local need, whether that be a Bembridge, East White or Island Wide. I'll start by addressing the first, detriment to the character of the local area. Committee members will hopefully have undertaken a site visit to familiarise themselves with the surrounding area. They will have noted that this is a rural location on a field where few other houses can be seen. One building that can be seen and is in close proximity to the site is Bembridge Windmill, a Grade 1 listed building. The land immediately adjacent is National Trust woodland. Unsurprisingly, Historic England and National Trust raised legitimate objections to this application. Only from a site inspection does it become obvious that this development is an incursion into the surrounding rural area, as opposed to an obvious or logistical extension to the built environment. Furthermore, the applicant has taken the decision not to base the design or the feel of the development on the mixed housing style of existing properties in Bembridge, but a bold, grand concept design similar to the experimental urban design of Poundbury near Dorchester. While there may be some merits in some of the design features near Dorchester and elsewhere, it is wholly inappropriate as a significant extension to an Isle of Wight village. If committee members are attracted by the Poundbury design, then I would simply say it is in the wrong place. The locality matters. Second, the applicant seeks to build a large development of 130 homes on these fields. That is a significant amount of housing and a dense development within the surrounding village environment. The size and scale of some of the buildings do not match with the existing residential dwellings. English Heritage have invited the applicant to work with them to reduce the size and scale, and I would urge the committee to reject the housing application, including on those grounds of size and scale. This may persuade the applicant to work with English Heritage and others to rework the plans to be more in keeping, which may also address the issue of the detriment to the local area. On the question of the local meeting the local need, this is an argument which has no sound evidential basis. I accept that there is a need for housing, but housing which is affordable, close to employment for young families and for working age people. This development does not address that need, either locally or for the wider island population. In any case, there is an adjacent development of 56 homes where permission has been granted and continuing infill of Bembridge, including on Steam Road. There is also the West Acre Park development by the same developer and the Penny Feathers, all within 5 miles of Bembridge, but much closer to local amenities and jobs. It is not the applicant's fault that Bembridge is an expensive area, which also appeals to second homeowners, but that nevertheless is fact. It is a myth that this development, including the way it's designed, will do anything to put a roof over the heads of those islanders genuinely in need. It is more likely to add to Bembridge's appeal as a place for middle class people and second homeowners. If there are genuinely affordable homes in this development proposed for Bembridge or East Wight, it would not look like this. In the officer's report on page 89, 0.7.134, this is reduced down. Officers are mindful of the impacts referred to above and have given due consideration and conclude that the public benefits of the scheme combined would outweigh the less than substantial harm to the significance/setting of Bembridge Windmill. The proposal is therefore considered to comply with the requirements of policies DM2 and DM11 of the Island Plan and the relevant guidance with NPPF. In terms of the overall balance and consideration for this development, this matter is considered to be a negative factor weighing against the proposal. Put that into context of 0.7.129, the Planning Act of 1990 imposes a duty upon the local planning authority to have special regard to the desirability of preserved listed buildings and their settings, meaning considerable importance and weight must be given to those heritage issues when striking the planning balance. The Island Plan core strategy and the National Planning Policy Framework are clear that great weight should be given to conserving designated heritage assets, irrespective of the level of harm. And if there is substantial harm to or total loss of significance of a designated asset, then permission should be refused, unless it can be demonstrated that the substantial harm or total loss is necessary to achieve substantial public benefits that outweigh the harm or loss, or the applicant can meet a series of tests designed to show the building has no other viable use. Where there would be less substantial harm to a designated heritage asset, this should be weighed against the proposal's public benefits, including where appropriate, securing its optimum viable use. The parish council has already made its own submissions about ignoring the local neighbourhood plan, pressure on infrastructure and pressure on the environment. Without repeating those excellent arguments, I fully endorse them. I urge the committee to reject this application for the reasons I've set out and the reasons given in their oral submissions today. I would like to carry on as a ward member. He would represent, Joe would be representing the residents' view. So I'd like to carry on with finishing Mr. McLeod's point.
Yeah, certainly.
Residents, there we go.
Time's up, I'm afraid. Apologies.
Sorry.
I'm going to invite, thank you, Councillor Blake. I'm going to invite Mr. Chick to address a couple of points of information in relation to the public speaking. Mr. Chick.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of points. One of the comments was about missing information relating to nutrient neutrality. Nutrient neutrality does not need to be achieved on this site. The site will connect to the public sewage system, which will direct sewage to the Sandown wastewater treatment plant, which the council's position statement confirms does not discharge into the Solent SPA. Added to that, I'm just going to provide on screen a plan which shows the nitrate catchment map issued by Natural England on their website in June 2024. And that shows that Bembridge is not within the nitrate catchment area. That is already covered in the officer report. That confirms that. And as covered in the update paper, the information in the Southern Water latest comment in terms of a capacity check We have spoken to Southern Water because the council hadn't requested a capacity check, as the letter says. And Southern Water have come back to us and said it was an internal mistake on their behalf, and they are not providing a capacity check, and therefore their previous comments should be taken into account. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chick. I'm mindful of the fact that you may not. Thank you. No, thank you. I'm mindful of the fact that we need to conclude at 7, so I would propose that we have an extension of committee. I'm keen to make sure that we are not here longer than necessary, but this is clearly a very complicated application and it requires detailed ventilation and exploration. So I'm going to suggest that we extend until 8. Hopefully that won't be necessary, but could I have a seconder, Councillor Churchman, in favour? Carried. Thank you. We will extend until 8. But yes, Councillor Jones-Evans. You're voting yes, yeah, thank you. Splendid. I'm mindful also that we may be here for a little bit longer. I'm looking to colleagues as to whether they would like a comfort break of some sort. Councillor Price.
Could I raise a point of order in a second?
Yes, yeah, certainly. You can do so now. Yep.
Thank you. It's regarding comments that were made, particularly by Mr. MacLeod, with regards to officers and staff at the council. I feel very uncomfortable with comments that were made. It's, you know, opening the doors to a suggestion that there's some clandestine system where developers and ex-planning officers and agents can come straight to planning officers for information when they absolutely cannot. I can assure you of that, Mr. MacLeod. You can't speak, I'm afraid. And I just want to say, as the most experienced member of this planning committee, I have many times disagreed with our planning officers, and I'm at loggerheads with them constantly over certain issues. That's councillors are there to do that. We're there to you know, to really dig down into detail and be their critical friend, I suppose. You know, much similar to being a governor at school, perhaps, and digging into things that we don't agree with. But I just want to reassure the public that there is absolutely no way that that situation can exist. It really cannot. And if there's any proof of that, I'd say, you know, let's get it out in the public domain. But I feel very uncomfortable that there are officers here that are not able to respond. They're not able to even respond to councillors in this manner. And I feel that those comments should be disregarded at this committee. Thank you.
Could I please, if Miss, I will ask you to leave if that happens again. Thank you. Councillor Brodie.
Chair, I'd just like to say I absolutely endorse everything that Councillor Price has said. I think some of the comments that were made by Mr. MacLeod and some of the correspondence that's been in the media, etc., has been appalling, to be frank. The officers that we have no ability to respond to that. They're professional officers, and I'm probably the second longest member of this committee, and I have never ever witnessed any of the sort of allegations that are made. Frankly, they're never made by people who give their names to it, apart from Mr. MacLeod, to be frank. It's the keyboard warriors of this island. They annoy me so much. This committee and its officers do the best job that it possibly can, openly, honestly and transparency. It's a shame that some members of this council don't recognise that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. Yeah, I would firmly endorse that, and I think, frankly, any suggestion without evidence is execrable. We will move on. I am conscious that we have been speaking for some time, so I think I would suggest a 10-minute comfort break. And I would ask that no one discusses this application. Certainly members of the public do not approach councillors if you meet them outside. And I will see you back here at 5 to 7. Thank you. if you could all take your seats, thank you. I believe that Councillor Jones-Evans has left, so we will continue. We will move then to the question elements of this agenda item. I'm conscious that emotions are running high, but I would simply reiterate what Councillor Price and Councillor Brodie have said in terms of respect for the officers who don't essentially have a right of reply. So let's keep things even tempered, as I'm sure they will be. So we move then formally to the question part of the item. Who would like to start? Councillor Brodie, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a question that I think I'm going to start asking at every meeting in future. Can the officers please explain? The question of affordable housing comes up all the time. And it seems to me there's always an assumption that it's all about houses to purchase, etc., which it isn't. Could you perhaps go through the sort of categories of affordable housing that are dealt with when we're looking at the 35% policy that we have within the current island plan? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. Mr. Chick.
Yes, so that there can be affordable rental houses, shared ownership, market discount. I can't remember the other one. There's another one. Miss Wilkinson may be able to remind me of what it is, but they're the basic ones that we can look at. But there are several routes to it, and affordable housing providers tend to use various routes.
Supplementary, Councillor Brodie.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And in terms of affordable rented housing, could you give us a little bit more detail as to what qualifies for affordable rented housing in terms of rental value and how that relates to the local market rent for the Isle of Wight? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chick.
Right, so I'm just going to quote what the NPPF says basically. Affordable housing for rent meets all of the following conditions. The rent is set in accordance with the government's rent policy for social rent or affordable rent, or is at least 20% below local market rents, including service charges where applicable. The landlord is a registered provider, except where it is included as part of a build to rent scheme, in which case the landlord need not be a registered provider. C, it includes provisions to remain at an affordable price for future eligible households, or for the subsidy to be recycled for an alternative affordable housing provision. For build to rent schemes, affordable housing for rent is expected to be the normal form of affordable housing provision, and in this context is known as affordable private rent.
I could have one more supplementary.
You may.
I think it's important to just follow it through. Mr. Chick, could you also tell us if there is, and if there is one, who the registered provider is likely to be or will be in terms of this development if it was approved? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Chick.
So the registered provider would be the applicants. They already provide affordable housing on their scheme at Rookley, which is up and running, and those properties are managed by the applicants as a registered provider of affordable housing.
Thank you, Mr. Chick. Councillor Stewart.
Not surprisingly, Councillor Brodie has asked most of what I was going to ask, so I can keep it very simple. We talk of local for rental property. You talk of local affordable rent. Is that local immediately to Bembridge or to the island more generally? Obviously, on the basis that the rentals in Bembridge will be significantly higher than they might be in, say, Ryde or Newport.
Thank you. Mr. Chick.
Yes, so it's based on the open market rental price of that property, wherever it's located.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Bacon.
Thank you, Chair. Slightly more specific question. We had a letter circulated amongst committee members earlier this week, which was the detailed response from Historic England. And we've had the extra comments today which refer to that and refer to the report saying that the representations in that letter are taken into account. I think the comments are summarised at paragraph 610. In terms of the response, I'd just like a little more clarity detail, because I don't think the I think the response is that in or around paragraph 7.65, but it doesn't directly reference historic England in those comments. So I wonder if the planning officer could just clarify how the objection raised by historic England is deemed to be addressed in the report. That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bacon. Mr. Chick.
Thank you, Councillor Bacon. Yes, the section 6 is obviously a summary of what the responses are that we've received, as we always do. But the actual substantive response to their comments is in the impact on heritage assets section, which starts at 7.121. And that explains the concerns that Historic of England have raised, and then officers' balance and officers' judgment based on their comments and our understanding of the heritage asset, having visited the site. So that ultimately the planning authority can make that judgment. It doesn't have to follow what Historic England say, but their comments are taken fully into account as the statutory consultee.
Thank you, Mr. Chick. Supplementary?
Yes, allied to that, we had in the proposed area of development, the area nearest the windmill, which I think was the southwestern corner, referred to as a green. Is that, I may have missed this, but is that area in any way supposed to be preserved or protected as part of the proposal?
Thank you. Mr. Chick.
Thank you. Yes, so it forms part of the open space, and so its management will be secured through the legal agreement. And in terms of formal protection going forward, anything that was proposed to be built on that land would need planning permission, and the planning authority could then make a judgment whether that was officers or the planning committee. But ultimately, if the application was approved, and this is the layout shown on the screen, the development would have to be built out in accordance with the approved plans, and any diversion from those would be a breach of planning control, and then the local planning authority would then assess what action to take after that.
Thank you, Mr. Yes, supplementary.
I apologise.
No, that's fine.
But Councillor Brodie had 3, and I think my question was more: is there any proactive suggestion of proactive protection of it, registering it as village green, for example, or could that potentially be included?
Thank you, Mr. Chick.
No, there's nothing in the conditions or the planning obligation to say it should be registered as a village green, other than not to register it as that at all. And that's indubitable. But in terms of how it is managed and how it's retained, it would be open space because of what the plans show and what the legal agreement would do in terms of how it was managed.
Thank you. Additional questions, Councillor Churchman?
Yes, this to me, for the size of the village in the area, 130 houses. When this was presented to the officers, was this questioned at all as to the sheer total size of the development in this particular area? As already stated, it is the largest village in the on the island. In fact, I think it's classed almost as one of the largest villages in the UK, if I remember correctly. So could I ask, did the officers query the size of the development?
Thank you, Councillor Churchman. Mr. Chick.
Yes, we didn't query the size insofar as the area of the land that's proposed for development, but we did raise some concerns over proximity of housing to the windmill, and that resulted in the village green that is shown there, or the open space which is shown there, with those houses set back. For memory, the proposal also had 3-storey buildings. So if I just get the laser pen to work, and this says only recollection, but in recollection there were 2 3-storey buildings proposed here, but slightly forward, and we raised concerns about that, having had our conservation officer's advice on the scheme.
Thank you, Mr. Chick. Supplementary, Councillor Churchman.
Yes, I'm amazed at the actual housing. I had a quick add up, so I'm well out, but 5 5-bedroomed houses, 28 4-bedroom, 55 3-bedroom, 11 1-bedroom and 10 2-bedroom. Now, if we're talking about affordable housing, again, did the officers query the mix, also taking into account the fact that Steam Road already has a line of 4 and 5-bedroomed houses between the roundabout and the Windmill Hotel? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Churchman. Mr. Chick.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the relevance of that because you're determining the application in front of you ultimately, not pre-app discussions 2 years ago. But in terms of housing mix, we always provide standard advice, which is that the development should comply with policy DM3 insofar as the housing mix and take account of the housing needs assessment and the findings of council documents that relate to housing mix. So that would have been our standard advice.
Thank you. Additional questions from colleagues? Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from Councillor Churchman's question, if I may, we've heard, and it's contained in the papers, that the allocation by the SLAR and in our emerging plan was for, it said, at least 80 houses. So I accept, of course, that it could be more than 80, but 130 is rather above at least 80. And if I've understood it correctly, the Historic England have said that if it were a smaller development, more in line with 80, that would mitigate the harm that it finds likely to occur to the windmill. Have you or officers considered, therefore, that comment and whether or not it should go back to the SLAR recommendation of at least 80, so 80 at maximum, perhaps 100, in order to avoid the harm to a grade 1 listed only